Joining us now is the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome Michael Adams. He is an American anesthesiologist. He's Vice Admiral in the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps. He serves as the 20th Surgeon General of the United States. Prior to becoming Surgeon General, Dr. Adams served as the Indiana State Health Commissioner from 2014 to 2017, and he's with us now. Surgeon General Adams, thanks for being with us, Doctor.
Good morning, and I think the two most important things from my bio are that I'm a still practicing physician at Walter Reed Medical Center. I hear my colleagues out there when they're saying that they need PPE, and I'm a dad of 3 young kids who all are bouncing off the walls right now at home, but we're doing all we can to make sure we're practicing social distancing, and that's the most important message for people this week. The numbers are going to get worse. Things are going to continue to go up in terms of cases and, unfortunately, deaths. But it's why it's all the more imperative that everyone takes this seriously and stays at home if they can.
Where's the end game here? Like, when people say they want to, I just had Steve Bannon on. I syndicate a show. He wants to shatter the curve, shut the country down for 15 to 45 days. States have it in varying degrees. What's the metric here? What day do we get up and say, okay, today was the first day of improvement? Sir, what does that look like?
Well, that's a great question. And you've heard people talk about curves. There's the China curve, the South Korea curve, and it's important to know that there is hope. When you look at when China really leaned into their mitigation efforts, social distancing, restricting travel, making sure people were working from home, it was about 6 to 8 weeks that they saw it took for things to level off and start to come back down. And now they're reopening their economy, their society. When you look at Italy, they didn't take that course, and their curve is still going up. And so we're somewhere between the two. One important thing for people to understand is that in the United States, we have a system of federalism, and that means the authority lies with the states and the governors. And so what we're trying to do with the president's guidelines to slow the spread of coronavirus is give people the tools that they need to do the things that we know will help slow the spread, and many of them are doing this. Unfortunately, you look at at Washington, D.C. over the weekend, there are still people out en masse checking out the cherry blossoms. California, where they've been hard hit, still people crowding the beaches. Just to be honest, not enough people are taking this seriously. And the final point I would make is that the numbers you're seeing right now reflect what happened 2 weeks ago. We needed New York, we needed California, we needed other places to really lean into these tough mitigation measures 2 weeks ago, and we need places around the country to be thinking about, okay, well, how do I prevent myself from being the next New York? And that's by getting serious right now. And I hope people hear the urgency in my voice. I don't want the healthcare system to be overwhelmed. I don't want my colleagues and my friends to run out of PPE and ventilators. And the best way to do that is not by trying to treat things on the back end, although it's important that people have those tools. It's by making sure we're lowering demand by preventing the spread.
So preventing the spread, we've gone through the social distancing. Here in Virginia, where I live, we don't have a shutdown. I guess that's coming today because there's a lot of pressure now on these governors to do what the other governors did. I guess. I don't think we need one here. But look, we've got social distancing. Schools are closed. If you can work at home, you do that. No gatherings over 10. But you still get curbside pickup. You could still, wash your car. So the car place was open, right? Only 10 people there. That everybody's got that max. Does that work, or everybody just stay home and shut the windows?
Well, it's interesting you bring up that point, because one of the things I'm concerned about is people getting depressed, more domestic violence. We're worried about people with substance use disorders. We need to make sure folks understand that you need to be healthy to be able to fight off the coronavirus if you get it. So we want people to be able to go outside and exercise. We want people to get vitamin D and to be out in the sun, but we just want you to do it 6 feet apart from each other, and we want you to avoid these large gatherings. You can't go out and play basketball right now because, I don't know, I've played a lot of basketball in my day, but it's hard to play basketball without touching someone or getting within 6 feet. Thinking about that and being smart. And it's really going to take America saying, let's all do our part, and not really people thinking, how do we wait until we see a problem before we react to it, how do we treat our way out of this problem, but how do we prevent ourselves from getting in that problem in the first place?
We're with Dr. Jerome Adams. He's an MD. He's at Walter Reed Hospital. He also happens to be the Surgeon General of the United States of America, the 20th one. So, Dr. Adams, let me just ask you this. What about herd immunity? I mean, one of the risks of closing schools and everything is you don't develop a herd immunity. Some people have suggested maybe that was a different way to go. Obviously, there's a risk involved with that. But how long will it take for the human body here of healthy people to just develop an immunity to this virus, sir?
Well, it's important for people to know that this is a new virus. There's a lot that we don't know. But when you look at the flu, for instance, you don't develop herd immunity to the flu. You don't develop herd, because it changes from year to year. You don't develop herd immunity to the common cold. And so we don't want to rely on that alone. We have kind of a three-tiered way that we're leaning into this, and I'll start far out and go backwards. We're looking at vaccines, but it takes about a year to develop vaccines. So vaccines would be available next year for next season if this comes back. In the interim, we have therapeutics, and you've heard the president talk about how we're making therapeutics available. That's months away, where we could have therapeutics available en masse, but we're doing studies now and allowing it for compassionate use. But right now, the best way, and this is every spread of infectious disease like this we've seen in history, the best way to stop spread is really with basic public health measures, washing your hands, staying away from people who are sick. That's how we slow the spread, how we stop the spread now, and buy us time for those therapeutics and those vaccines to be developed. And we'll see what happens in terms of herd immunity. That's going to happen because we now have 300,000 plus people who've been diagnosed, who have been tested for coronavirus, and you see the cases go up. If it's going to happen, then it will happen, but we don't want to rely on herd immunity alone to protect the American people.
Dr. Adams, how do you control the hysteria and panic that goes along with this pandemic?
Well, it's by putting things into context for people. It's by giving them timelines. It's by showing them the data from China that says, look, if we do this, we can get over it. It's by helping people understand, and I hate comparing because in many cases it's apples and oranges, but helping them understand that we've had 20,000 plus people die from the flu in this country, and we've had millions of people get infected with the flu. It's by trying to give people some sense of context and some sense of what the timeline will be like if we do the right things.
I want to ask you, Dr. Adams, for our listeners out there today, we're with Dr. Jerome Adams. He is a practicing doctor at Walter Reed Hospital. He's also the 20th Surgeon General of the United States. Let's talk about but from the standpoint of health, has the Trump administration, in your judgment, responded appropriately and powerfully enough?
Well, I can speak from my time on the task force, and from the time I've been on the task force, I know that we're meeting every single day. We are, before and after the meetings, meeting with folks, talking to people in private industry, talking to governors. Everyone is taking this very seriously, and it's important for people to know that health is number one. The vice president, when he runs these meetings, the president, when he runs these meetings, when he's down there, starts every meeting with Dr. Birx giving a scientific review of what's going on, with Dr. Redfield giving information about what the CDC is saying most recently. And the vice president frequently says, Tony, referring to Tony Fauci, does this make sense to you? What do you think about that? The science is leading the way on this, and we are taking it seriously. Again, people need to understand the United States government was set up, designed in the Constitution to put a lot of the power in the states. And we recognize that what you do in New York City isn't going to be what you do in Omaha, Nebraska. And so we're trying to work through this system. Important for people to know FEMA Level 1 activation will empower and enable more of those resources to get to where they're most needed. The states and the governors know how to work with FEMA, but we're trying to respect the Constitution, respect that the authority lies at the state level, but still give federal support and guidance.
Dr. Adams, Surgeon General of the United States, one of the big fears that we keep hearing is that hospitals, hospital beds, ICU units, that the system will get overrun. I have heard some people over the weekend say, oh my God, the healthcare system in the United States will collapse. What does that mean?
Well, when we talk about flattening the curve, what we're seeing in Italy is they had too many cases too quickly, and it just overloaded the healthcare system. And then healthcare workers started to get sick, and that made it worse. And so flattening the curve means lowering the number of cases at any given time so that when you hit your peak, you still haven't overwhelmed your capacity. And we are worried about that happening in places like New York City. Important for people to know that we are using FEMA to deploy resources. We have the the Army Engineers, National Corps of Army Engineers there. We're sending the Comfort, a hospital ship there. We sent over 2 million masks out to California, New York, and Washington. We are actively working right now, and there are materials and people on the ground, and we're sending more materials to where they need it the most. But the way you flatten the curve isn't by throwing more and more and more supplies to it. The way you flatten the curve is by preventing people from getting infected, telling people to stay at home, and really taking the measures that will help enable them to stay at home. It's why the bill in Congress is so important. We know a lot of people aren't staying at home because they've got to work. Mm-hmm. They've got to pay the bills. We know that a lot of people don't have sick leave, and so we want to give people the tools to make the right decisions to ultimately help us flatten that curve.
Final question, because I know, Doctor, you're short on time, but I want to get to the end game here. In your view, in a perfect world, best case, what's the end game, Dr. Adams?
Best case scenario is that we are able to deploy resources to the hot spots efficiently, to the New York, to the Washington, to the California, that we're able to use our FEMA mechanisms to make sure our healthcare workers are getting what they need to respond to the flare-ups, but also that governors and mayors and the United States citizens are taking the appropriate measures to keep their towns, their cities, their states from becoming the next New York City or the next Italy. And again, that people understand that this will be time limited. We will get over this, and the amount of time it takes will depend on everyone leaning in. I put out an article today, an op-ed about pulling down elective surgeries. We know that there's a national PPE supply, and so we don't want people using up personal protective equipment to do elective procedures in one part of the country while New York can't get personal protective equipment. If we do that, we're looking at 6 to 8 weeks based on the China data before we can start to get back to normal and open up businesses in a significant way again. If we don't do that, we could be Italy, and this curve could just keep on going up. And so it's go time. We're at major decision points, and I hope Americans across the board from top to bottom will make the right decisions to protect their families, their communities, and our country.
Dr. Adams, you're very convincing and inspiring. So what you're laying out here for our audience is take a breath, follow the guidelines, don't get in crowds, don't play basketball, right, as an example, do the right thing, and get this thing to level out. And if we do the right thing voluntarily, right, we don't want martial law and cops coming around handcuffing people because they're meeting in a group. You just want everybody to do the right thing. If we do that, then we can follow the China example where, 8 weeks basically we're in a pretty good position rather than the Italy model, which has been a total disaster. Exactly. And important for people to also take care of themselves. We're seeing younger people in the United States seem to be, at least at this point, more at risk than we saw in China. And there's all sorts of theories behind that. One of them is that more young people vape in the United States. And so perhaps they have some pre-existing underlying lung damage that puts them more at risk when they get coronavirus. But try to stay healthy, try to exercise, try to find something to occupy your mind. It's a great time to try to get online and learn to play an instrument if you can. Learn to play the piano or get some new books to read. Keep your mind and your body occupied. And one more very important thing, if you are healthy and you're able, please
consider making an appointment to give blood. Just like it's essential that you go out to the grocery store, to the pharmacy, it's essential that we continue to give blood because right now the American Red Cross and other blood societies are looking at shortages, and we want to make sure we don't have more unintended consequences from this coronavirus situation.
All right, I got to tell you, I am now like the ultimate fan of Surgeon General Jerome Adams. That was the most inspiring 20 minutes of radio I've had since this thing started. You're giving people hope. There's kind of a timeline there. I'm inspired to do what you are asking and to get everybody to do that. And I think there's a way out. And I really want to thank you, Dr. Jerome Adams, for your time. Great, inspiring message, sir. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for getting the word out to people.
Now, we got to get you back on because it gets tough here sometimes when you're, following all the fake news and, without getting political, not in your world, but, we have to deal with the CNN nonsense and all that garbage. It's just great to get somebody on of your knowledge and expertise, Surgeon General of the United States, to have such an uplifting and inspiring message. Thank you.
Well, thank you anytime, John, and take care. Stay safe.